Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast where the Backlog Boys, that's us, if you didn't know, look at every single Best Picture winner in random order and an attempt to figure out which one of them, the single one that we like the most, we try to figure out which one that is, as well as rank all the remaining Best Pictures. And this week, we are talking about a Best Picture winner from 1956. It would happen to be Around the World in 80 Days, directed by Michael Anderson. And I think we have a lot to say about this film. I don't know if this film has a lot to say itself, but I have many points to bring up to talk about it. And I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say. We really haven't discussed it much back and forth between each other. This should be a good, fun episode. I'm just going to lay it out there. But before we get into any hooligans, any tomfoolery, let's do a little bit of housekeeping, because last week, even though it was a little confusing while we recorded, On the Waterfront, which we talked about, 1954, just 2 years prior to this film that we're talking about, got an average score of 8.4 and ended up at 28th place on our list. So we liked it quite a bit. We had a couple of points here and there to discuss about it with, Marlon Brando and Elia Kazan. And I highly recommend going and checking out that review. Now, Abram, I do believe you have scoured the depths of our comment section and picked one that you would like to read to us.
Yeah, see, here's the situation, Tina. We need to do almost like a disappointed parent thing here at the top of this segment, because there were no comments on the waterfront, which is simply unacceptable. Every day I get out of bed thinking, man, today I'm going to see that John Tour comment, I'm going to see that Dan's comment, I'm going to see that Nameless Anonymous comment. No. So here's the thing. The old guard is falling. Now is your opportunity to rise, Nameless Quest viewer. I'm not talking about Nameless Anonymous. I'm talking about totally Nameless
Yet unknown.
Come rise to prominence right now, because here's the problem. Instead of reading a Quest comment from the base show Quest for the Bestest, I'm here talking about base, low art cinema here. This is a comment from our review of Top Gun Maverick, which, by the record, I think is better than almost every film we've watched for Quest for the Bestest, in which Andrew Orozco of My Star Wars Show and Back Cod Banter fame writes, and I quote, "Love the beach scene. It was really great seeing the whole team interact in that way. Honestly loved it more than the OG volleyball scene." Now, the reason I read this, completely outdated comment, but we have been posting a lot of movie reviews over on the YouTube channel. So if you're on Spotify, head over to YouTube, because stuff that we do there doesn't always make it to audio feeds. So come watch us review all kinds of great films like Maverick, or all kinds of nonsense like Bob's Burgers, and come watch my Star Wars show also. So,
You've no doubt heard of our internet famous, the internet hit, the BLB RRR review. But if you haven't, if you've been living under a rock and haven't seen that video, give that a watch too. It's pretty popular, as I understand.
If you've been living in anywhere but India.
Anyway.
And boy, howdy, does this film, Around the World in 80 Days, take a trip to India that perhaps the Indians would not be so happy with. I want to hear what you guys have to say about this film. Can we do a little challenge? Can you, given the film is about 3 hours long, sum up your thoughts about it in the least amount of time possible. Ready? Go.
Okay.
We're talking like how many words, or like
no, just brief.
Length, duration.
How about this? If not for the incredible scale of the film, this would be the worst movie we've watched for Quest for the Best.
Oh, is that the hot take you proclaimed a little bit before we started recording? Yeah,
Yes.
I find it hard to disagree with that. It's certainly not the one I've disliked the most, but I came into this film with high hopes. I'm like, hey, I've been enjoying longer films. This seems to have a lower average on everything, but maybe I'll be the one. Maybe I'll be the staunch defender of Around the World in 80 Days. Nah, I really tried my hardest, man, but this film goes nowhere while going everywhere. And I think that's an impressive feat in itself. But man, what an addition to this list,
Maybe a subtraction, actually.
That's a great point. Division.
Needed more Steve Coogan and Jackie Chan is what I'll say. But no, I agree with Tucker and Abram. Tucker, I love your point of this film goes nowhere while going everywhere. Because that just really is. There's no character arc in this film for our main character, Philleas Fogg.
Phileas.
Phileas, by the way. It is jam packed with sequences that go on too long and harmful racial stereotypes. I'll add as well.
Across the
So
board.
just a lot of negative points starting off with the bat here.
Yeah, I mean, I think Abram, you bring up the single positive point about this film in that does have a very large scope, and I think the set locations are good, but everything else, oh man, it's so boring. There's no plot. It's so boring. Things just like nothing happens on screen. Everything happens off screen. It's so stereotypical. Like even the sections where they're stereotyping America are like outlandish and ridiculously like, oh my god. Not to mention like just the bigotry and the racism throughout the film. These
Everywhere.
Good lord.
Here's the interesting thing about this film is when we're watching it, and it's going on long, it's got an intermission. I'm sitting there, I'm not enjoying this, but I can see why this would win Best Picture in the 1950s. This film goes around the world. It does feature all these other cultures and flying machines and all this stuff, which people in this time period had not like fully experienced. Like we've seen videos, we've seen documentaries of all these places. We know that these stereotypes are harmful, but I assume for the people who saw this film when it came out, this was their first exposure to, the idea of all these cultures across the world, or most of them had probably never been on an airplane before. So seeing people up in the air or cameras up in the air was probably very impressive. And it is long and it features all of these cameos, which are probably one of my favorite parts about this movie. It was fun seeing famous actors that I recognize pop up. But absolutely makes sense as a for that time Best Picture win. But it has just lost all sense of relevance. And it has actually become harmful as a Best Picture winner. If you're watching through Best Picture winners and you see harmful stereotypes of essentially every culture on the planet except for the English, that's bad. That's not good.
Yeah. Tucker, I would argue that the non-character that Phileas Fogg is a harmful stereotype of the British. But no, not actually. It's much more derogatory towards people of other nations and other cultures and things like that.
Yes.
So I kind of want to start at the beginning of this film because this film has an interesting like prologue to it. I've never seen something like that before that sets up the film. What did you guys think of this whole? We get to see what is it called? Journey to the Moon, the Méliès film.
Trip to the Moon.
A trip to the moon at the beginning, and then we have this long
cinephile card revoked.
Goodbye. I'll have to go trade it in for my film bro card.
Yes. Well, Timo, you can trade it in for your journalism bro card if you can name me the person who does the intro to the film.
No.
It is, of course, famed American broadcast journalist Edward R. Murrow.
Oh, I was going to name someone else.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Extraordinarily relevant for today.
Here's my feeling on the intro. I think it's pointless. I think it is absolutely not useful at all beyond the fact that I was like, oh, it's fun to see what they're showing me, right? But the film just has no, like, in what, can anybody tell me in what way that was at all important to what happened?
I think
we all have thoughts.
We all started, and I'm going to go.
Okay.
We all started, and I'm going to go. I think that it tries to set up this theme of like the world is shrinking, which is sort of like the appeal that Tucker was talking about for people in the 1950s. Stupid people in the 1950s who didn't know what China was like or whatever, or India or Japan or I don't know, the American West. Never mind. But I think it is supposed to set up this theme of like, hey, I'm Edward R. Murrow, the man you trust to bring you your news, and here's the world, and boy howdy, it was shrinking. But back in the 1870s or whatever, one man, this guy Jules Verne, he predicted that the world would be shrinking, and boy howdy, let's take a look at that story. And then it's really boring. But I think that's what it was trying to set up, was this idea of like bringing the world together, and like because traveling technology, we can do these things much more easily than the characters in the film.
Perhaps it was also like a tempering of expectations, kind of being like, hey, nowadays you can just fly around. But back then they couldn't just fly around. They had to do all these crazy steps to go through traveling around the world. That was the only other additional point
Boats,
I got out
mostly.
of it. Yeah,
Mhm.
boats.
Boats
Well,
mostly.
and some trains, but
And also the final thing, and I think the most obvious thing, is taking apart the are discounting, not fully, but discounting the thematics that that Tanner tried to or talked about, is that one of these is a Jules Verne story and the other one is a Jules Verne story. And like I do think that it's like,
Yeah.
hey, look how much cinema has grown in this short period of time. We can show all these crazy things that George Méliès did the best he could, and honestly, let's be real, A Trip to
Sorry,
the Moon, better film
sorry,
than
who
this
Tucker?
fucking thing. Oh, sorry,
Who?
George Malay, as
There
they
you go.
say.
Oh, George
God.
Melee. Yeah,
Oh yeah,
George
Melee. Yeah.
Melee.
But I liked seeing it because I like A Trip to the Moon. I've seen it
Yeah.
numerous times throughout my life, and having someone sort of commentate over it, it was fine. But man, what a waste of time! Entirely irrelevant to the film. Tax on an extra, close to 15 minutes or something like that. That can easily be cut off and saved you a little bit of pacing. But maybe one of the most interesting parts of the film. But
Yeah.
that's not a part of the film.
It did start off on an interesting note that I did not expect, and then
Yeah.
when we went into the rest of the film, it's like the worst aspects of like 1950s Hollywood / British big blockbuster. Come out and see this film.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
Abram,
now,
what's your response to any of this?
yes.
My response, I think you're probably right, but I
Oh,
don't
sure.
care. That's kind of my multifaceted approach, because ultimately I think that Tanner, I like what you're saying, and I get that's what they're trying to communicate, but this is a movie that has no interest in really like conveying a
No.
message of any variety. It's like maybe the world's getting smaller, but honestly, I don't know if that really comes across in the movie, because it seems kind of big to me, and we'd never really unpack things. He kind of just like travels, and then there's a problem. He gets over the problem, and we keep going, right? I think the movie has two separate issues, right? There's a lot more issues than two, but I think there's two main issues. First of all, is all the awful racial stereotypes in the white European man going around solving all the problems and all of these other cultural contexts. Didn't like that very much, I have to tell you. But the other problem is that the
hot
movie,
take.
on a plot level, on a plot level, nothing has any weight or consequence. So that's why I don't really find myself buying in at all to the idea that little prologue is setting up something grander, because can you point to me one moment in the film where you felt a sense of struggle?
No.
There's
I
one
can't,
thing
and
that
I think
has
that's the
there's
largest
one
issue
thing
with the
that
film.
has consequence is when good old Phileas Fogg and his buddy Passepartout save the character played by Shirley MacLaine, and she joins them along
Oh
the rest
boy.
of the film. But it's not like that really changes too much about the film. It just is a consequence of an action that they had. But that's the bar we're talking about here.
She is so emblematic of everything wrong with this movie, actually. That she might be the one point of intersection between like the movie is nothing happens of consequence in the plot, and it's horribly racist, right? Because first of all, you got Shirley MacLaine there in blackface, but not blackface, brown face. Apologies. Make sure we get our
Yeah.
racial terms right in here. This is the quest for the bestest. But like she does nothing.
No.
She has no function in the narrative moving forward. She almost imparts a lesson onto Fogg, but then we would have had to unpack something. So suddenly, oh shoot, Fogg messed up the calendar. Now we can complete the journey, right? When you really think about, she is there as like eye candy in the most literal sense, and has no function beyond that other than to just like kick around. She's like an RPG party member you never talk to, and it just. I have nothing.
So
else.
Yeah,
we got a whole quest episode to fill, so I hope you're
Yeah.
not completely done.
I'm on this.
You bring
this-
up. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Timo.
I have a point to bring up here, Tanner.
Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm on this. I'm on the social media app Be Real, and I was watching this movie when Be Real pinged me saying, "Hey, take a picture of your stupid whatever you're doing." And I was watching this movie and like, oh god, I have to show everyone that I'm watching this horrible movie. And so then I had to write a caption of the frame that I was taking, and I titled it "Orientalism: The Movie," because this movie is. The racism, I think, stems from this like really exoticized and really like Orientalist look at the world, in which they don't really travel to anywhere other than either British territories, British overseas territories, India. They go to do they go to Egypt or they go through the Suez, which is
No.
British.
Yeah.
There's a pyramid in the credits,
Hong Kong.
but
Yes.
they never went to Egypt.
They go
Okay,
to
well,
Spain, Hong Kong, Japan,
India,
America.
China.
Oh, and India. Yeah.
Yeah,
And China.
and so
yes.
Hong Kong
Hong
and
Kong.
India
Oh,
are
my bad.
British overseas territories in the film, and then contextually in the film, Japan is like a pseudo American like area where because America has come in and said, "Wow, we have to trade with you, so open up." Um, and it's like, oh man, like even the film even points out at the beginning that there are other parts of the world that they can go to and that they are just not going to. Like they don't
Mhm.
even examine the fact that Africa exists. It doesn't exist in this film. And when they go to, they spend the second half of the movie in America. I'm like, wow, okay, this is one of the more interesting No, that's sarcastic. This is like you're in like a location that we've seen over and over again in films. It has its own genre. What you're in,
Yeah.
and so like while the setting allows for beautiful location photography, it's like, and we get ample time to look at the locations. I think
Yes, we
that
do.
like, you pick better locations. Now, perhaps that's a fault at the Jules Verne story, but like, still, man, Orientalism and racism abound. They're endless in this film.
Yeah. I think it is emblematic of this film's the 1950s and then the 1870s ignorance of this story that the best location in the film in which like is the most interesting. It has interesting side characters and has like the weighty conflict is America, and the film is largely disinterested with examining like the real an honest depiction of the culture of any of the other countries that it visits. But when we get to America, we're like, wow, look at all these cool characters, and wow, there's this beautiful landscape, and these characters are getting caught up in conflict, which of course is a raid from a Native American tribe. But I think it is emblematic that it spends. I don't know what the economy of time is honestly between all of these countries, but it feels like America.
It's crashing,
Honestly,
Tanner.
the economy of time is crashing. But I think it is probably America that we spend the most time in.
Yeah.
Maybe second to Spain, because boy, howdy, do we spend a lot of time in Spain.
That is the first thing that I wrote down on my notes. And I think it's emblematic of a pacing issue that I got a sort of live tweet thing from Abram yesterday saying,
Mhm.
like, this movie does not respect your time. And I think the moment where I feel it most is with Spain. Because not only is that the first location that we end up in that isn't Britain, and I think that the first part of the movie moves at a reasonable pace before they get on the balloon and start traveling. Because
Mhm.
it's set up, it's context. I think that might be one of the more interesting parts of the movie. But then when we land in Spain, alongside Fog and Passepartout, we have two whole sequences that are played out in their basically their entirety, and it's like 35 minutes that we spend just like watching things happen in Spain because you got to get a guy to do a thing, and it feels like the most like bland video game side questy thing that like you don't want to be spending your time in a movie, especially when there's such a condensed time period. But like I just immediately felt boredom. Not only because what was happening wasn't very interesting. Um, actually, that's exactly why. But
Mhm.
I can see why they did this because okay, Spanish culture, flamenco dances, bullfighting. These are things that people, Americans and British people of the time probably hadn't seen. They are colorful, flashy, exciting, but spending this much time on them doesn't make a lot of sense, especially with that economy of time that Tanner was talking about. Is so misbalanced. Like I
Mhm.
would have much rather them be walking through a forest in India for a longer period of time, looking at wildlife or exploring Japanese culture in a more thorough way. But like spending like two full sections in Spain, I think felt really, really like
And
that was a bad indicator for me.
yeah, I think it's because that's probably what a British and American audience of the time were most familiar with. I mean, like
Mhm.
Spain is part of Europe, of course, and I think it would have been better if we got to like see a thing from every country. At least it would have felt maybe less Orientalist. in that sense, in the sense that Timo was using that word. But at the same time, that also has a great possibility to be like condensing a country down to like this one practice or event or whatever.
Well, that's still what they do.
Yeah, exactly. They still do that, but at least it would be visually and conflict and interesting conflict wise. I don't know. Go ahead,
Well,
Abram.
yeah, well, I think it just points again to the fact that we're watching this in 2022, and so, and I don't even mean that in the sense that we've been talking about it, and we are pointing out all of the harmful stereotypes that would have passed easier back then, but from the sense of there is nothing interesting about the
Yeah.
camera work anymore, but the film really hangs its hat on that. There are truthfully a lot of shots in this film that literally should have been cut away from 15, 20 seconds sooner
Yes.
than they do. But the film feels, I think, a sense of novelty that obviously was there. And Tucker, to your point, is probably why it
Yeah.
won Best Picture. But I think about there is some inventive camera work here. Like I think about the hot air balloon
Mhm.
sequence a lot because we see that goddamn hot air balloon from every possible angle. And then we see the ground from the hot air balloon and we watch the camera sway. And the film, I think, once you'd become lost in this feeling of, oh my God, look at where we put the camera. Or when we get, and Timo, I said you were going to get hot and bothered for the train part, and I think you probably did because there's all these gratuitous close-up shots of wheels and on the front as we're looking down the track, and it's almost fish-eyed a little bit around the frame. And like, this stuff does not hold up anymore. But the film, in a lot of ways, to me, felt like a 3-hour like reel of,
Sure.
of the cinematographer's ability behind the camera. But that doesn't translate to a compelling film, and I think Spain is a perfect example of that. When we're watching uncut this dancer making an audition tape, and then we have to see Passepartout get up and do another
Mhm.
dance, right? It's not only about not valuing your time, it's about very transparently shooting sequences only because they look pretty or because they seem
Yeah.
novel in the
And
editing.
I think
Oh.
about that. I felt that particularly when in the bullfighting sequence. I've been reading Hemingway.
Oh, that's such
Hemingway writes bullfights really, really
Mm.
well. Oh my God, they're so
you-
boring
oh.
in this. Like he's like, ah, and then like we wait and we see everything happen, and the same action happens over and over again, and we're in this like wide shot of this very large set that's quite pretty, but man, no like. Oh, we get the closest shot we get is of the bull. We never get to see Passepartout being like afeared for his life. You know, the bull, he doesn't know what he's doing. He's got to just do this. And even the consequences of that whole setup are just like there's no stakes because the dude had like kind of already agreed to give his boat to Fogg, but then he's like, oh wait, I take the backsies. You got to do this
Mhm.
bullfight thing, and like like
Yeah.
that was where it felt at its most gratuitous, other than when I was hot and bothered, not because the trains were there, but because they moved so slowly. The trains just like didn't go very fast, and I was like, can they go quicker? That was what I wanted.
Maybe they couldn't in 1870, Timo.
I have some trivia that will maybe illuminate some of the issues that we're having with the sequences in Spain, as well as maybe some of the plot progression in the rest of the film.
Okay.
Is
Plot
that
progression.
the role of Passepartout was greatly expanded from the novel to accommodate Mexican star Cantinflas. In the mid-1950s, he was the wealthiest movie star in the world and got top billing in Latin countries. And for the bullfighting sequence specifically, Cantinflas actually had bullfighting experience, and he was in the ring with the bull. That was one of the first sequences to be shot of the film because they could easily swap him out if he got horribly injured.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we don't make movies like that anymore.
Exactly. But yeah, and Abram, just your point about our cinematography of the camera up in the hot air balloon or whatever. I compared those shots to Disney's Soarin'. For anybody who's been on that ride,
Oh,
it's very
yes.
much just like
Fun ride.
we have progressed to the point in the year of our Lord, the 2022, the 21st century, where we do not need 3 hours of plot around these Disney Soarin' rides. You just need to spend like $250 and then wait in line for 2.5 hours to see these shots on Disney's Soarin'.
I want to say on the bullfight
Okay.
for a second because I think the bullfight is emblematic because we're talking. You said you want to maybe transition to plot a little bit. Passepartout has maybe more plot armor than any character I've seen in a long time. And I was making a point about this in the Discord. And I think it's actually a larger scale issue than I even anticipated when I wrote it. I basically said like problem arises. Impossible to solve. Next shot, problem solved.
Yeah.
Third shot, we've
Mhm.
moved on, right? And I think that Passepartout ends up in these incredibly precarious situations. Potentially going to be gored there, drugged and kind of kidnapped
Mhm.
by some random detective, falls off the top of a train, almost gets burnt alive in an awful sequence full of just really harmful depictions of native culture, right? There's Passepartout is in so many situations that are always solved by, you know what? We left the audience suspense for 2 seconds. It's good enough. I think about the sacrifice one for a second. We arrive at the station, right? Or it's the fort. We go, oh my God, where's Passepartout? Where's Passepartout? Who was taken by the Sioux, who are going to light him on fire. And then Fogg goes, oh God, what are we gonna do? And then the guy goes, oh, I don't know, we can't rescue him. Passepartout goes, we have to rescue him. And then he goes, okay, who wants to go rescue him? And like 30 frontiersmen raise their hands, like, let's go
They
do
just
it.
those
And then
frontier.
the next shot, it's done.
That part is accurate in my mind because the frontiersmen, all they really wanted to do is just go kill some Indians,
Sure.
and they were given they were handed an opportunity on a silver British
Sure.
platter, and they took it up gladly.
Yeah, which is probably it's crazy that we spend most of the movie in America, and they have a sequence in San Francisco, which is reasonably length and has some over the top Americanness of an election and politics and how crazy we Westerners are.
Aren't Americans
those
extravagant?
Yanks.
Hardy har har.
Oh, the
Yes.
Yanks, they're so
And
crazy.
then they're supposed to be going to New York, and I believe that they do, and they take off from there. But we don't ever see them do anything else in America other than do a Western movie for 40 minutes, in which the entire conceit of this 40-minute segment is that the indigenous Americans are inherently evil, barbaric creatures, and everyone just got a gun and they're gonna kill them. And it's it's so repetitive and gratuitous that I think that's also on the level of not respecting your time, and the combining of not respecting your time and over the top stereotypes. Like the way that they showcase the indigenous Americans being just shot by everyone and their mother is just ridiculous.
That part in the year of our Lord 2022, it's been a relatively bad string of school shootings in America, and we should not joke about this. But they pull out all those guns. They just all these guns.
Everyone on the train has a gun,
and I'm like, oh yeah, well that's why we have a gun problem.
Yeah.
So two things. First, I'll talk about, you're forgetting they're not all barbaric. Some of them want to stop the train to smoke.
Of course, yeah.
My bad.
Yeah.
First of all, you forgot that.
That scene is so funny, and it's the way is like, they're smoking from the peace pipe.
Yeah, it is just very much like a dumb American who paid 25 cents to see this in 1954 was like, oh, that's what it used to be like. Huh. So, yeah.
My second point there is that, speaking to the siege of the train, that is probably one of the worst looking action sequences I have seen in a long time. There's literally a Passepartout is on top of the train. He's running across the top of the train as though it's Uncharted 2. You literally see an arrow hit him and bounce off of him.
Thank you, Abram. Why wouldn't you cut that? I was ranting about this to talk about while we were watching this sequence. Why wouldn't you cut out the fucking shots when the arrows bounce off of him? Well, maybe that's just Michael Anderson wanting to establish his real actual plot armor. His literal plot armor.
It's the pants he wears. It's those threadbare striped pants. They're invincible.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Where are we heading next, boys? What country are we going to tear apart next?
So I want to stay in America for just a second because I actually don't. I think the second half is probably the better half of the movie. You know, this movie is split by an intermission. I find the San Francisco thing fun, of the British people going there and them being like, they must have elected a new president, when it's literally just a political rally for an upcoming governor's election. I think.
Yeah, I think so.
That's kind of fun. And then obviously you get into the everyone's shooting at Native Americans sequence. But it also has probably the best cameos, which I'm sure we'll get to in due time after we run through all these countries.
Yeah. Well, we can go. I guess we can. So we did Spain. And let's talk about India now because
Okay.
we can just hit all of them. How about?
They don't really do much in the rest of these countries. All they do in India is save Shirley MacLaine's character from the Indian
Oda.
Auda
Princess
from
Oda.
what they're a death tribe or
The
whatever is
death
how they're
cult.
described.
Yeah, something
Yes.
like that.
Awesome. Very cool.
Yep.
Here's something that I want to. So we're talking about plot here. There is this overarching subplot of whether or not Fogg is the bank robber and
Mhm.
who has taken the money and is now running off and essentially spending all of it on this trip, all 55,000 pounds. In the end, it
Mhm.
turns out that he is not the bank robber, and the film never explains how he spent all this money. Like, where did the money come from? Why
Yeah,
did
he's
he?
just already obscenely rich.
And
Mhm.
he spends more money than I think he makes off of the bet. He's like, if you do the math from the beginning of the film, he like tells us how much is in this bag.
Something
And
like
to
yeah.
me, the bag is an ingenious plot. They're literally carrying around a bag of money, and the writers never once think to like, oh, you've lost the bag of money. That's a great
There's
plot
a
point.
couple times where it feels like that's about to happen when Passport 2 is just like going around saying like, "Oh man, look, we've got this giant bag of money,"
Or his eyes go
and
like
my
"Yarn, yarn,
master.
yarn," when he sees a woman.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Yeah. And there's like all these circumstances where you think that we're going to get caught off track. A shenanigan is going to happen where Passport 2 and all his clumsy misdemeanors. Well, that's not the word that's not the word I
It
meant.
probably just Tucker when he goes up and harasses that woman. I'm pretty sure that's a
It's a
misdemeanor.
great point. I was going to say misadventures, but I
Yeah.
misspoke. Maybe a Freudian slip.
Yeah.
You think that he's going to lose the money. The money's going to become a problem. They're going to have to maybe slum it for a bit in one of these countries, and you're going to have to see Fogg deal with being poor for a little while. But they never even reach that point of mild plot progression, mild character development. But Abrams' point to the more interesting things happening off camera is very salient, and I think that the biggest example of that is this arrest plotline, which frankly I'm almost more invested in the betting going on back home in Britain and all the culture around Phileas Fogg, trying to get like everyone's talking about it, and like he's becoming this crazy legendary character. All of that I find pretty interesting. The idea of this going around, but then the plot line of the detective chasing him all around, I'm like, okay, ooh, this is going to ramp up to something kind of interesting. There's going to be some conflict, and then he gets put in jail, and then we don't see a trial. We don't see them find another guy. They just walk into the cell and say, "Oops," and that drove me nuts because I
Yeah.
was banking all the boring slowness of this movie that at least there was going to be some sort of thing when they got back home. Fogg is going to have to deal with a circumstance that challenges his character. The people at his little club are going to have to be like, "Oh, is he a criminal?" and like really deal with that. But the fact that they deal with it off screen, we don't even get to see like a trial or something, really feels is the biggest example of no real plot progression
Yeah.
ever happening here.
And not only do
The
they
film
deal
seems
with
to. Ooh,
I just
I was gonna
very quickly here,
go
Tanner,
ahead,
very quickly.
Timo.
The
Yeah.
all those moments of which they solve the problems, it seems to me like every single problem is solved with the bag of money. They just pull out
With
more
money,
money
yes.
out of the bag and pay someone off, and
Fogg
it's
just pays someone to do something for him
and
consistently.
that is like the laziest and least interesting way to have any sort of conflict resolution. Like
The movie seems to hate you if you've seen a movie before. If you expect there to be conflict and resolution and climaxes and things like that, it's like, no. Why would you expect that? Why don't you just look at these pretty shots? Hmm. What do you want from us? Hmm. Yeah.
I think that the last 20 minutes of this movie are terrible. I think they're actually terrible. And it really does hinge on that moment, Tucker. When the detective shows up and says, "Oh, sorry, we got the wrong
Mm-hmm.
guy." To be honest with you, I was checked out
Sure.
long
Yeah.
before that. And frankly, I would look up from my phone back at the movie and realize that nothing of consequence had happened in like 45-second intervals. But when that happened in particular, I was like, you have to be fucking kidding me. Because it leads to not only does the film devoid of any kind of true progression, it is so ungodly convenient. The plot points are so convenient. Now, let's focus on the ending, but then we'll talk about what I think might be the most ridiculous convenience is when we find Passepartout in the circus. Been missing where we're going to find them. Let's use deduction. Deduction brings us to the circus. We'll talk about it. At the end of the film, I agree with you, Tucker. I think this meta narrative of betting on Fogg as though it's like a horse race, and people getting telegraphs early and trying to go place bets before the information gets out to everyone, saying better odds. Like that is compelling. However, what it seems to be building towards the moment where these old guys doing these insider trades, being Debbie Downers, get their comeuppance. That's what you think the movie's building towards. But the film literally ends with Fogg walking into the room, announcing his presence. We have his new almost bride walk into the room. They go, "Oh my God, a woman!" and then Passepartout opens up the window, and they go, "This is the end of Britain," and the movie cuts to credits. And I thought they were playing a practical joke on me.
I think it's so funny. It's so funny.
It's an insane way to end that movie.
The woman walks into the club and the empire dissolves.
Yeah, that moment I think is the ridiculous part to me. Is we play up this thing of no women. This is a very
which is historically
British institution.
Correct. It's historically correct,
of course.
But
then the way that they treat it so absurdly at the end, and the painting falls off the wall, the guy drops. It's like it's a funny moment. It's probably one of the funniest moments in the film. But like, how'd you find this place? Like there's too many things that like go against this where I'm like, that's not a funny enough punchline to end your movie on.
Well, I don't think it's even a full punchline. Like it's like the joke doesn't even have time to come to fruition before the movie ends. It's the guy like says a thing that you would expect there to be a payoff to the physical comedy, but then no, it's a fade to black and it's credits time.
It's a backlog banter ending.
Yeah.
Oh. Let's talk about your thing, Abram.
Yeah, talk about your thing. The circus thing.
The convenience you're going to talk about.
They're actually, yeah. Well, because here's the situation. There is an actual, because it goes back to the detective plot line, right? The detective has to get Fogg under British jurisdiction. Yeah. And there's some kind of hold up with the warrant. I have never
has to get there. It has to be mailed.
Yes.
Sure, but
he's moving too fast.
I don't really care. The point is we're going through Passepartout to get to Fogg. And so the detective is befriending him. We go to get the drink. We drink, what do they call it? Like the Japan knockout or something? It's ridiculous. Because he takes a drink and he literally, his vision goes woozy, more cool camera tricks, it gets all funny and he flips and he falls over. And then in a sequence that I didn't fully understand, like people like kidnap him and put him on the right boat to separate him from Fogg, and then he wakes up with literally no money, completely in a foreign country never been to before. Cut to him like doing a stage performance.
Well, there's also him wandering around Japan with no money, like looking at food and be like, "Man, I wish I could eat food."
Great point. But then Fogg goes, "Oh shoot, we lost Passepartout. Darn it, we gotta find him. Okay, we gotta look across all of Japan for him. Or no, we're in Yokohama. We gotta look across all of Yokohama for him. Now, where would he be? I don't know, but I do know how to use this new method of discovery called deduction. And then without explaining to us how his deduction works, we walk past the circus and he goes, he's in there. And then we walk in and there he is. And the whole, literally, again, in a comical moment, the entire stage folds in on itself. And then they leave, and there's never a conversation about how he got kidnapped. Never.
No. Let's see. I realized that we neglected to talk about Hong Kong and Yokohama. That's because nothing happens there. The only note that I have from that, the only two notes I have from that part of the film are, they take the SS Rangoon. Very cool. Thank you. An ostrich rickshaw. Which is just an interesting thing.
That was one of the coolest things in the movie. I'm like, I would love to ride a little thing pulled around by an ostrich. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yes.
What about the wind power, the thing they ride through?
The sail train. The sail train was awesome. I loved the sail train.
That's
That
another
was
thing
the
in the
most
American part
ingenious
that I
thing
liked.
that they thought of the entire movie. That was like the least convenient and the most thought was put into writing that out of every other
Mhm.
solution to anything in the film.
And then they
It-
passed the train. And they're like,
And I'm like, suckers. Okay,
Yeah.
I think
quickly about the trains. I mean,
Oh
I guess I
boy.
already said it. I already said it. The trains just move so slowly. They're like, you're right. It is judicious. We see all these shots of them like moving along, but like, if I wanted to see, if I were gonna try to do that, and keeping in mind, in the 50s, I would think it would be more impressive if they went fast, because then you'd have that illusion of like speed, and
sure.
you're going somewhere, and the whole film is trying to build up this idea of, oh, Fogg is moving very quickly. He's going to do it in less than 80 days. And man, those train sequences are just kind of boring. Well, the whole
Yeah.
film is, but the train sequences, especially, they stand out to me because it's not going to take a lot for me to be interested in a train sequence. I'm gonna kind of by default, but I was disinterested when I was shown how, you know, you know, slowly everything was moving, and the train is like crawling along the tracks, and like all the bits with the train where it's like when they reach the end of the track in the Indian jungle, and the dudes are like, what do you mean you thought you were going to go all the way? Didn't you read the sign in the station that we are never shown? That like,
Good
oh,
point.
we're like, it doesn't actually go all the way, and haha, I guess you just got to figure out your own method of transport. um hmm,
Cut to
yeah,
elephant.
Cut to paying for elephant.
cut to
Mhm.
buying an elephant.
Wait, no. Before that, cut to discussion about, oh man, it's going to be impossible to get that elephant. Cut to on top of the elephant.
Yeah, and I think that is
Oh boy.
the convenience, and a lot of the weird progression of this film come from the actual travel sequences. They're always looking for someone to give them a thing so they can continue their journey, because oh man, it's just impossible for us to get out of here right now, and we can't get our tickets, and oh boy, this is going to be so difficult. And the fact that we hardly ever see that progression, I think, is what makes the travel sequences so boring and frustrating. And I think the instances where we do end up seeing them are some of the best parts of the movie, like when they're flying in the balloon. That balloon sequence, probably one of the most inventive and impressive and iconic aspects of this film. I think
Mhm.
that them riding the train in America, while of course it has its problems with the indigenous Americans, also one of the more exciting parts of the film from a pacing perspective. And of
Mhm.
course, it's a whole riff on the general, and you got Buster Keaton as the conductor, and that is just fun, isn't it?
Yes.
And also, I think that the sequence where they have to get back to Britain and they have to burn everything on the ship, kind of
Also
fun that he
fun.
just like,
Yeah.
I will buy the ship because I have an inordinate amount of money, and you will burn everything. And then, you know what? Here's the boat back. Fix it, because I don't got time for that. I kind of found that to be entertaining, but it's when he pays for a boat, pays for an elephant, pays for another boat, pays for another boat. Because God, they ride a lot of boats in this movie.
Yeah.
That's when I lose the most interest in the film.
Yeah. I do have I have a bit of trivia, and then I'm going to roll into wins and noms. And I want to do I want to spend a bit more time on wins and noms, because I want to hear you guys' reaction to each subsequent win and nomination for this film. But before I get
Okay.
into that, oh,
Can I,
Abram,
Tanner?
yes, please.
I just think it's going to be if it's going to be a non sequitur if I don't
Okay,
bring
go
it up
ahead.
right here. I just wanted to quickly mention, talking about the train, talking about these interesting sequences. When they blew up the bridge over the River Kwai, I was also
Yes.
quite entertained.
In the American West.
When the camera cuts like ultra wide, and yes,
He just made a joke.
and then
Nice
it's
joke.
like
Keep up.
the entire, like we watch the entire bridge fall apart, and we see the train again. Talk about no consequences. Start to roll back over it, and the whole time Fogg is just doing his crossword puzzle, and then we throw all of the coal into the train to make it go as fast as possible to not fall to their death. And he goes, now we're moving on to the next.
Yes.
And then it's never
No,
talked
All
about.
right.
just the British expecting more than is humanly possible out of every possible situation.
So this movie set quite a
That's
few
the theme of this
records
movie.
in terms of its production. It used 146 sets built at 6 Hollywood studios, as well as sets in England, Hong Kong, and Japan. It set the cast and crew flew over 4 million miles around all of these sets. The casting included over 68,000 extras in 13 countries, and over 74,000 costumes were designed,
Wow.
made or rented for the film.
Sure.
The 1,243 extras listed on the IMDb page were only extras who worked on the film in Hollywood. 90 animal handlers managed over 8,000 animals, The breakdown there is 3,800 sheep, 2,400 buffalo, 950 donkeys, 800 horses, 512 monkeys, 17 bulls, 15 elephants, 6 skunks, and 4 ostriches.
Nice.
Yes.
Wow.
Okay, and now for the wins and noms, and I want to hear you guys' reaction to each of these. So naturally, this film won Best Picture. That's why we're talking about it here today for your pleasure.
The reaction is the episode.
Yes, the reaction is the episode.
Go back and listen to the episode if you want to know our thoughts.
This film won Best Adapted Screenplay. This film also won Best Cinematography. So,
I think that's fair.
Yeah,
I think we
fair,
pointed
fair.
out some reasons for why that could be. Yeah.
Yeah. Film won Best Editing.
It does a lot of it.
It does a lot of it. That's what the Academy likes.
I mean, it's not like the editing is used super poorly, like within sequences. I think the problem is the editing between sequences.
Yeah,
or when
I'd
there's
say
a
it's
lack of editing.
Yeah, it's a dual screenplay and editing issue there that we've talked about quite a bit. It also won Best Musical Score.
Score's good.
Yeah, score is good.
No, the score is not. The score is.
Oh,
the score.
I should have considered that.
It is. I sort of like when it like pulls in recognizable motifs from other things, but man, does the score just tell you how to feel. It's just like, oh, right now you're supposed to be feeling patriotic because we've just boarded the USS General Grant.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And there's the Indian theme, the Native American theme, and they're like, rah, rah, and it's like super evil sounding, and like, oh, we're in Japan, and now we have like the most stereotypical music you could ever possibly conceive
That's
of
also
for this,
a great point. Yeah,
for this culture, and like it probably was not even written or conceived or thought of or played by anyone who would have been brought up in the culture and would actually know what the music is supposed to sound like. And over and over and over again, I just felt myself being like grossed out by the score.
Yeah.
That's actually an interesting point. I think that it's when those motifs hit that I'm like, this is lazy. What are you doing here? But I think the moments where maybe it's original score, it's hard to tell. But I like the score when we're panning over Britain, when they're taking off in the air balloon. There are moments where I feel the score is impressive and bombastic, and I enjoyed those moments. But I think on a balanced scale, yes, it's not a well utilized score because it does increase the stereotypicalness when they're about to arrive in Japan and they play a little stereotypically Japanese ditty. I'm like, wonder where we're headed next. And yeah.
Timo, I hope you were wearing headphones when you were viewing this film. Otherwise, all your neighbors would have had to stop and salute with the number of times they play "Hail Britannia" in this film.
I was not. I was blasting it loud and proud. Off of the laptop speakers.
And everyone around him was...
Yeah, they were all saluting.
Or British people salute, I guess.
Just run through the nominees here. Michael Anderson was nominated for Best Director. It was also nominated for Best Art Direction and Set Direction and Costume Design.
Also
those all make a lot more sense than the ones that it won, actually.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, impressively directed film. What a feat. What a feat to do this. Insane that it was conceived and came out, as good as it was in the 50s with the technology they had. Michael Anderson, I believe, very early on in his career that he pulled this off. And also, we haven't been talking about it, but this film is well made. The sets are insanely complex and huge scale, and tons of extras, amazing costumes. Like from a production value perspective, this is absolutely up there with things like Ben-Hur and Titanic, but I think it feels a little bit less impressive to us because it is just like, hey, you're looking at Indian culture. I'm like, yeah, I've seen better representations of these things. I've seen a bullfight before, but obviously for the time,
I've seen the film Red Notice. I've seen a better bullfight.
I have seen the film Red Notice. That's a true fact about me.
Last piece of trivia before I think we should address the cameo stuff in this quickly before we wrap up. Michael Todd is the producer for this film, and as Tucker and I watched the little intro to this by a guy from Turner Classic Movies, we learned that Michael Todd was maybe not the most well-renowned producer in Hollywood at the time. In fact, he was not a well-renowned producer. He had to scrape together a lot of money to make this film because A, he wasn't established enough to get it made on his own, and B, it was thought that this book was unadaptable into a film version.
It's the Dune of its day.
Yes, but the trivia I have is maybe interesting in
ways.
how this film built up some credit amongst the people, because Mike Todd implored theater owners and to promote this film differently than they had other big epic films of the time.
Hmm.
He instructed them to show the film exactly as they would a Broadway show, which would mean doing reserved seating, distributing playbills before the film started, stocking soundtrack albums and hardcover souvenir programs for sale in the lobby, removing clocks from the theater, and banning the sale of popcorn and concessions to prevent audiences from leaving their seats.
Wow.
Yeah.
You can't get away with that nowadays.
No, you
Nope.
cannot.
This
Hey guys,
movie is 3
Endgame
hours
is so
long.
good, no popcorn allowed.
Yeah.
No
and of
clocks
course,
either. You cannot notice
Yeah.
how long this film is.
Take your
Give me-
phone.
hand over your watches.
Both of them in your
and
pockets.
This film largely invented the concept of having cameo roles in a Hollywood film. There is a number of them. How many did you guys catch? I know Tucker was going to catch quite a few. He probably caught the most of any of us because he's really tuned into those old Hollywood stars and things like that. But how many? Timon Abram.
Not many, because I knew they were in there, but also like with the aged Hollywood stars, like the ones who have gotten older, wasn't that good. So I got Buster Keaton and maybe
Yep.
who was the woman in San Francisco that was always trying to
Marlena Dietrich.
Okay, yes, I got her too. I was like, I thought maybe she was Barbara Stanwyck for a little while, but Marlena Dietrich makes more sense.
Yes.
So that was
Abram.
for me.
Okay, all right. Not even Frank Sinatra was the pianist in San Francisco as well. No,
Probably was
okay,
looking
all
down
right.
at your phone because he does a very clear turns his face
Yeah,
towards the camera and then
he like
linger on it. It's
nearly
Yeah.
winks into the camera.
Yeah,
That's Frank Sinatra.
he's seconds from winking.
Another one that I think was very obvious, and Timo, maybe you picked up on this one as well. Also, maybe one of the most problematic ones.
Oh yes,
Peter Lorre.
yes.
Peter Lorre plays a Japanese man who's on the boat, and Peter Lorre not Japanese.
Fun fact,
And,
not Japanese.
And also,
Peter
he's not,
Lorre is-
really what?
He's German.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
that doesn't matter, right?
Doesn't
Proper racial
matter.
casting? No.
No,
But he also is not doing he's not really doing a stereotypical Japanese accent. He's doing his normal Peter Lorre voice, but he's just cutting out words to make it sound like he doesn't do English well.
Mhm.
And it's very strange. But also, of course, John Carradine from Stagecoach. He's the rootin' tootin' American guy who's on the train with him. He was really fun. I did think Buster Keaton was very well utilized. It was kind of fun to see him.
Mhm.
Very old, but playing sort of the same role that he did in The General, which way better movie than this. Go watch The General.
Go watch
I love
Stagecoach. Yeah.
Marlena Dietrich, Frank Sinatra, as you said.
Yes.
John Gielgud was one of the guys at the British guys at the beginning. Charles Coburn, who I enjoyed in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and The Lady Eve and movie like that.
Who's
fun,
the
but-
guy? Who's the guy from Some Like It Hot? Who's that guy?
Oh God.
John E. Brown or something
Oh,
like that.
he's
Yeah,
in that too.
something like
the
that.
guy from the end of Something
Yes.
Like It Hot. Yeah.
Yes,
the rich
exactly.
guy,
And
the rich
he's also
guy.
good in that role. Yes.
Mhm.
Well,
Is,
nobody's
is-
perfect.
Is the guy is the guy with an indiscriminate number of switchblades a cameo?
I don't know.
I don't know
Honestly.
which character you're talking about.
Oh my god! Are you telling me you don't remember the guy that keeps pulling switchblades out of his jacket pocket and
He's
throwing them into
he's
the
like
table?
the
No.
opposite of Marlena Dietrich.
Oh,
guy.
her like protective boyfriend or whatever.
Something
Maybe.
like that.
Yeah, who's like every situation calls for a switchblade. I didn't know if he was a cameo.
Not that
or
I
not,
got.
'cause that's such a weird character.
Let's see. Oh, I do have some trivia related to the cameos. People who got cut or weren't contacted and were sorely sorry that they were not contacted. Gregory Peck was originally cast as the U.S. cavalry officer, the guy who was leading the charge to go kill those darned Native Americans who kidnapped Portmanteau or whatever his name is.
Portmanteau.
But Mike Todd felt that Peck wasn't taking the role seriously enough. Yeah, how dare you not take the role seriously in this very, very serious film, Gregory Peck? How dare you, frankly? John Wayne was also considered for that role, which is interesting. Probably would have fit with the whole Western theme. And Orson Welles was apparently hurt that he was not contacted for a cameo in the film. I don't know. Well, I guess it was because he had worked on a stage adaptation of the show or of the novel years earlier, and like wanted to be in the movie, but was never contacted apparently. So poor Orson Welles.
Who would you guys have liked Orson Welles to be in the film?
Oh, Passepartout.
Passepartout.
I think Orson Welles has the agility and physique to take on the things that Cantinflas did here.
He probably would have made a good surly old British man in the Reform Club. Like one of the ones who was like, ice, why I can't believe these people are drinking ice. It'll freeze your liver or whatever. And the guy who's like, that confounded creature is stomping around, and it's like a cat.
Being
Like,
quiet, yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Those are the moments where I felt that the movie was off to a good start. I was like,
Yeah,
oh hey,
I agree.
it's got this really funny British humor where it's like making fun of the uber rich in Britain, but that that doesn't really carry throughout the film. And I do think that the cameos, as we're listing them, are probably my favorite aspect of this film, other than its scope and production quality. Because as someone who is a fan of a lot of these actors, it is fun to see them show up in bit roles and sort of invent the idea of a cameo. Like, it is important to film history for that, and I certainly can imagine this also being an aspect of why it was considered one of the best films of the year. You see Buster Keaton and Marlene Dietrich in these small roles, but you're like, that's Buster Keaton and Marlene Dietrich, some of the most important people in film history, and they're in small roles in this movie. This movie has to be good if they're getting these people on it. But we did hear in the intro thing for the TCM guy that it was mostly just like them lying to these actors, saying, "Hey, you're gonna have a big role in this, and we're gonna film this," and then they just weren't. They were just small roles,
Yeah.
and
Pranked
so a
him.
lot of lying, a
prank
lot
him,
of
Mike.
tomfoolery.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh golly. I
Yeah.
think that's all the trivia I have. That's all the notes I have, I
All
suppose.
the thoughts I have.
I think
Yeah.
so,
More
too.
thoughts?
I have nothing else to say.
Head
on this movie.
empty.
I already put a
Oh,
score
you
in.
did.
Actually.
Wow. Okay.
Should
golly.
we give this a ranking? What do I want
Let's
to give
do
this
that,
film?
I think.
What do I want to give this film? I'm looking down here on the bottom of the list and getting some comparisons. Man. Okay,
Yeah.
here's one thing while we're entering scores. One thought I had about this film is that it felt like it wanted to be a musical. It was like
Yeah.
on the verge of breaking into a musical number many times, and it never did. And perhaps it might have been more entertaining if they had a little bit more song and dance in there with more singing. I don't know. I don't know if it would have really worked, but
Yeah.
maybe.
If there's a little bit more great Ziegfeld in this movie, it would have been
Yeah.
better.
I mean, yeah, Great Ziegfeld is a better movie than this.
I don't think so.
agree.
Okay.
Let's type in our scores, guys. Come on.
Okay.
Chop, chop. We don't have
Everyone's
all
got
day.
them in.
We don't have 80
Let's-
days.
Let's reveal it. Nice one. In 3, 2, 1. Doosh. Okay, across the board, woo, a little bit spread out, actually. I'm surprised at 2 of you. The average score is a 2.3. Now, the point breakdown, starting from the bottom because we're so low. Abram gave it a 0.5. I gave it a 1.0. Talker gave it a 3.7. And Tanner gave it a 3.8. So 2.3, we don't have any ties to break. It is going to go below Tom Jones, another British movie actually on the list,
Yeah.
at place number 70. So there's 2 films that are below this on the list. Well,
Yeah.
thoughts?
They're also the 2 other films that I've given 0.5s to, because here's the situation, right? This isn't. I'm not here to be charitable to these people. Honestly, it's like, yeah, the movie is impressive in its production design. It's impressive in its scope, but I don't care. I don't
Yeah.
care at all. The context of this discussion was how terribly racially harmful the film is, how absolutely devoid of plot and character motivation it is, how nothing feeds naturally, how it's a complete slog. I think this movie is, in the context of what Quest for the Bestest is, completely irredeemable. I don't personally know if it's worse than Broadway Melody or Crash, but luckily I gave both of those 0.5s also, so I can just have that and be the third entry in my 0.5 club. But I really think this movie is
To me,
I think that's
I think, like I had fun when I watched Crash. Like I like enjoyed my time with that movie,
Mhm.
even if it
Same
was
point.
just god awful. And I just didn't have fun with this. This was just not a fun movie to watch. And I watched it because I had to watch the whole thing. But as soon as I hit those credit sequence, there's 14 minutes left on my little player, and I was like, I'm out. I'm done. I'm not watching the rest of this. He said the end. I'm out. So that's why it gets a 1.
I want to mention that there is a distinct possibility that if you watch those end credits, your score would raise, because those are the best part of the film. Absolutely, bar none. They have all these unique animations for every single one of the main cast members. They go on for like 7 minutes. They're really well animated. They're really funny, really clever. Absolutely one of the best parts of the movie. Like, I actually recommend just watching the credits if you want fun little animations. But yeah.
Okay, well, I still have the movie, so I could go back and watch the credits only at a
You're
later
not gonna.
time. I don't think I am.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I guess all I would say is that when the scores get this low, I feel like it's all a little arbitrary. I don't know. Like, this film could very well be worse than Crash with how long it is and how little it respects your time. But I think breaking it down by the minute, I think Crash might have more racial stereotypes per second than this film does. I'm just gonna.
I don't know if that's true, actually.
Square inch.
But they're on the same level, which is never a good sign.
Yeah, which is not a good sign.
You know, we're picking shits from a barrel here. But the reason I would say this film is redeemable as a best picture is because we have sort of put an eggshell around this conversation of, yeah, it makes sense that it won best picture. And when I'm reviewing it as a best picture, of course, we're reviewing it from our perspective. It's one of the lowest scores I've ever given. But I do think that comparing it to something like Bravo Melody or Crash, which is the only films below it, those don't make sense as best picture winners. I think that this one does. I can understand from the lens of someone back then why they would watch it. But you're watching the 2005 Oscars and you're like, man, I really hope Brokeback Mountain wins, and then Crash wins. You're like, this doesn't make, like, there's no logical sense behind this. And so I it's one of the lowest ones I've seen, but I understand this as a best picture winner. And so from that lens, I do think it deserves some credit. And I do think that, at least when I factor in my score, I have to factor in things like production value and scope and impressiveness in its production. Like, this probably was the most impressive movie made in its 5-year time span. I mean, I don't exactly remember which other films came out around it, but this is a very impressive movie. And through the lens of someone who watched back then, like, I can't imagine how crazy this must have been.
No, it got a handful of chuckles out of me. Most of them were from that rootin' tootin' Colonel Sanders looking guy who just only talked in like Wild West mannerisms. I like that
was funny,
guy.
yeah.
I like that guy.
Well,
There
should
we have
we put this movie entirely behind us, put the win in our sails, and
Yes,
go
please.
off to some other country, aka a different movie, aka the spin wheel?
I agree. Let's do that.
Let's go to the spin wheel. Oh, happy day.
I was remarking to Tucker that there is almost a 5% chance of whatever movie you want showing up.
Oh,
that's how low we're
nice.
getting.
Yeah, we are getting very, very low. We're running towards the end of our rope here. So
In half of a year.
Yeah.
In 22 weeks.
Wheel, what's your deal? Give us a movie that makes us squeal. Is it on digital? Is it on real? Wheel, what's your deal?
And
I decided
Wheel's
to improvise
deal
a little bit.
Is number 4. So,
Ooh.
what?
Recent one?
Yeah. This brings us down to the year of my birth. Anyone know which year? When was I born?
2000,
I know,
maybe.
2000.
Yeah, I was born in the year 2000.
The year of my
I know
birth.
what this movie is. Tucker, lay it
And
on
this
us.
is a movie starring a bunch of big fun people, including Jaimin Hansu, Oliver Reed, Joaquin Phoenix, Russell Crowe, directed by Ridley Scott. We'll be watching Gladiator.
Gladiator. I've never seen this one.
Another breezy 2.5-hour film.
Neither.
Well, I'm sure it'll be a bit more engaging. But warning to all you viewers out there: stay off your phones during this film, lest ye feel the wrath of Ridley Scott, who hates us millenniums.
It's a great line.
Millenniums on they phone. During his masterpiece films, I'm very excited to watch Gladiator. I've never seen it before. It's one of the films of all time. It's getting a sequel in sometime in the far flung future. Ridley Scott has confirmed he's making a sequel to Gladiator, so maybe we'll be reviewing that as a Best Picture winner in fucking 2026 or whatever.
And maybe we will be, and we'll have something to look back on.
Yes,
Gladiator Uno, I guess.
Yep.
Will we be entertained by this film? That is the question, of course.
That's right. Well, you'll have to just wait till next week to find that answer out, and hopefully, no, this is the one with the kicking into the
Nope,
kicking.
that's 300.
Oh
That's 300,
God.
yeah.
Okay, I've got these. These movies all actually look all appear the same in my mind. So
Yeah.
hopefully, this one sticks out in some manner. We'll talk about it next time on the Quest for the Bestest. Thank you for joining me on this very humorous, I would say, episode of the show Around the World in 80 Days. Good riddance. Thank God it's done. Let's be out of here. And that's the end.
Do the intro with your hand over your mouth so we can't tell.
You can ADR yourself.
I could be talking in an English accent in it.
Jesus Christ.
See, that's the reason why I don't want to do the accent bit, because it's just going to go horribly like it has every other time I've tried it.
It's a great point.
Mm-hmm. But in a lot of ways, that's the charm of Quest. Nice.
Especially once I'm back in game
Nice.
mode, which I am now because I've almost beaten 3 games today.
What's the third one?
Nipple
yeah.
Rubber Simulator 3000.
Shoot, what platform are you getting?
Nipple Rubber Simulator 3000.
I like to play nipple rubbering simulator 3000 on my Nintendo Switch.